All right. Book of Lucius. Nothing except the Supreme Spirit can have a real, self contained, and independent existence. This does not mean that nothing else is real, and by illusion is meant deception by the senses, which interpret falsely. Man is deluded by his senses, and so cannot distinguish the real from the unreal. 1. Chapter 1. The spheres of existence. This is the whole law needful for a man to direct his life. Know your nature, do your duty, and live in harmony with others. To live in harmony means doing wrong to no man. There is one supreme spirit which men call God because God means all good. But because men seek a closer relationship with the supreme spirit of good, they refer to it as Father and as Him, and there is no wrong in this. The Supreme Spirit contains the essences of all the perfections, and these flow out from Him in the form of vitality, which is called the Holy Spirit. The sphere of the Holy Spirit surrounds the sphere of the Supreme Spirit, and around this again and below it is the sphere of matter and mortality. In the sphere of matter and mortality, the Holy Spirit manifests imperfectly, for here it becomes mingled with the inert composition of this sphere. Also, the penetrated offers resistance to the penetrator, and this, combined with the effects of intermingling, causes obscurity, illusion, and ignorance. These are visualized in the form of a mist called agnosia. The activity of the Supreme Spirit in the highest sphere is unceasing, and this alone maintains the universes of matter. The basis of matter is an outflow of energy from the Supreme Spirit, which forms a kind of framework solidifying at its outer edge. The three spheres comprise the whole, no part of which is devoid of the vitality originating within the Supreme Spirit. So the statement that the Supreme Spirit is in all and all is the Supreme Spirit is true, though he does not manifest in the sphere of obscurity, illusion, and imperfection. This does not mean that the Supreme Spirit could not manifest here or that the sphere of matter and mortality is beyond his reach. These conditions serve a specific purpose. Nothing except the Supreme Spirit can have a real, self-contained, and independent existence. This does not mean that nothing else is real, and by illusion is meant deception by the senses, which interpret falsely. Man is deluded by his senses, and so cannot distinguish the real from the unreal. All the universes of matter are contained within the sphere of matter and mortality, which reaches out to touch the sphere of the Holy Spirit. Their greatness exceeds the bounds of man's most daring imagination, and even if man could penetrate through to their limits, he would still find the Supreme Spirit veiled and hidden. The Holy Spirit flows from the Supreme Spirit as heat and light flow from the sun, and penetrating all things holds them in form and solidity. The Supreme Spirit alone is unpenetrated by anything. He alone is whole and fully self-sufficient. He alone is the one pure essence. The sphere of the Holy Spirit is divided into subspheres, and this sphere of matter and mortality is likewise divided. The supreme ruler of the sphere of the Holy Spirit is the Holy Spirit, and the supreme ruler of the sphere of matter and mortality is nature. So all the material universes are governed by one set of laws called the law of nature. Nature is the effect of a manifestation of the activity of the Holy Spirit operating in matter, where reality is relative and not absolute. The earthly body of man, his moral shell and spirit container, is molded before birth by following a soul pattern drawn by destiny. Once born, many forces influence the life of man on earth, but he is also given the responsibility of free choice. Notwithstanding this, the life of any man can only follow a course set by destiny, but while on that course, he can do as he wills. Every single thought and act on earth has its effect on the soul's spirit projected into the sphere of matter and mortality. Man himself is a threefold being comprising soul, spirit, and matter, each having an affinity with one of the spheres of existence. Here on earth, the soul spirit is made ready for its life in the higher spheres, or it is neglected and ignored. This is the outline of truth within which our master taught, and Paramantris, his devoted disciple, has recorded what follows. He taught to 7 only in a small hermitage beside the forest brook. All right. Chapter 2, Vision of the Holy Spirit and Creation. My friends, the power of the Holy Spirit has led you here and directed your footsteps so that you may be well guided in ascending the heights of divinity. No other shall be admitted to our circle, for so profound a subject as that dealt with here would be profaned by the presence of many. To understand the Supreme Spirit is difficult, but enlightenment may be granted to those who diligently follow the great path towards spiritual development. To describe him to others is impossible, for no man possesses the eloquence, and no tongue has adequate words. Then, too, is it difficult for the imperfect to grasp the meaning of perfection, or for the visible to comprehend the invisible beyond its range of vision. The eternal is so distant from the sphere of mortal man that the beauty there can only be glimpsed as a dim reflection. This is well, for it, unshielded from the beauty beyond vision, mortal man would be consumed in its brilliance. Without its creation, the Supreme Spirit would be uncontrasted and therefore not really supreme, so he created. No man has ever seen him and lived, though many have been granted a sight of his reflection. So if any man says to you, I have seen the Supreme Spirit and now understand his nature, be sure he has not seen him, but only some distorted reflection. The truth is that the Supreme Spirit is not understandable to us mortals. He is far beyond mortal conception, and hence many say he is non-existent. The Supreme Spirit is outside beyond his creation, but his radiance is the basis of all things together. He is the central flame, and the souls of men are rushlights lit at the flame, but enclosed behind thick horn, so that they scarcely shine. The task is to par down the horn so that the light within shines brightly. Pare down the horn. Being without material restrictions, the Supreme Spirit is bodiless, and such a state is hard for the body-licked man to conceive. But man does not contact him through the body, but only through the soul spirit, and certain places and conditions are designed to help man make contact. Men may call the Supreme Spirit by any other name, which conveys a meaning of divine greatness. Provided the name is hallowed and held in reverence, there is no need to go into definitions, for this is an unworthy pursuit. Not any name or all names could adequately describe what is beyond description. The only way in which man can come to fully know the nature of the Supreme Spirit is through the Holy Spirit, through whose sphere passes the Godward road. This is all I need to say about the great name. When I was young, I thought much about life here and above, and in times of sublime contemplation, my inner being appeared to penetrate into the very heart of things. Once I became aware of the presence like that of some infinitely good and great being who spoke to me, asking what I wished to learn and know, I answered I wished to learn the nature of things and my own relationships with them. I wished to know the purpose of life and why I was born. The great being seemed to speak again with a voice resounding in my whole being. I know what you seek and what drives you to search. I carry the power of knowing all, and my vitality is a spring whose waters are available for the refreshment of every questing soul spirit. I am the manifestation of the Holy Spirit. When the voice had finished speaking, a brilliant light seemed to glow all about me, and vast radiant corridors appeared to open up in every direction. I became filled with an overwhelming feeling of love, and all about me shimmered soft lights, from out of which proceeded the most melodious sounds. Then from one side came a dark and gloomy cloud, and I was filled with foreboding as it writhed and twisted like a heavy smoke. From out of it came the sound of wailing, and there was a low murmuring moaning, long drawn out. Then I heard an exquisite sound which rose and fell like the notes of a divine melody, and between the brightness and the dark cloud a wall seemed to condense. It appeared to be an iridescent glass containing a living flame. not set in form, but with a flexible movement. From the wall came a kind of softly glowing vapor, which then rose above it. I heard the voice again, and it said, "Have you seen and understood?" I said, "I have seen, but understanding has not been granted." Then the Holy Spirit said, "I am the light, and the light is mine. The darkness and the cloud are agnosia, which seeks to increase its sphere by the agency of man. But the wall prevents it, and the wall is the mind of the Spirit. It is the barrier which agnosia cannot penetrate. The mind of man is a ray from the Holy Spirit pinpointed upon the spirit enclosed within a mortal body. Mortal existence is an echo through the corridors of time of the words spoken in the chamber of eternity. The sphere of the Holy Spirit is where mind manifests freely, unhampered by mortal limitations. I looked again, and the cloud and wall were gone, and then I saw the brilliance was divided by lights of many shades. Where the cloud had been, I saw a dullness amid brilliance, and then I seemed to be standing before it. I looked into the dullness as though down a corridor, and along its length the darkness increased, so that at the end there was a deep shaded gloom. In the dismal shadow I saw ugly, misshapen things moving sluggishly, as though the life within them was weak. They were creatures such as haunt the most horrid nightmare, and my eyes could not bear to rest upon them. I turned away, and the voice said, "In the place where garbage is disposed, life assumes unpleasant forms, and this is the spirit garbage of earth." Then I was drawn back into the light, and all about me was a joyousness and gaiety which seemed to have no perceivable source, but to be a quality of the atmosphere. As I stood joyfully bewildered in the radiance, I saw beautiful shapes which appeared to come and go like fishes swimming in and out of the water shadows. I sensed rather than heard laughter and the sounds of happiness, and my whole being seemed to be filled with joyful communications. Again I heard the voice, and it said, "This is the beauty and glory so feebly glimpsed in earthly existence. This is the diadem of life. When mind first penetrated, mind created matter. It brought light and life into being in greater and lesser degrees of manifestation. While the heavier mortal elements of matter tended downwards, those in which the light and life manifested the most tended upwards towards eventual spiritualization. When spiritualized, they were drawn by natural affinity into the sphere of beauty and glory. Affinity directs the course of all things and governs the destinies of men. The thought that flows out through the Holy Spirit bears designs of structures of beauty to the boundary of the sphere of matter and mortality. But the deeper it penetrates, the more these are distorted and dispersed. So it is that things unbeautiful and unsightly are produced in the depths of matter under the rulership of nature. In the realness density of the lower subspheres of matter, the influence of creative mind is less manifest. Elsewhere in the same sphere can be seen the effects of evil mind energy, which floats up like fumes from the disposal pit of spiritual garbage. Then I said, "But what caused all this to come into being?" And the voice of the Holy Spirit answered, "All things began with the intoning of the first creative sound. This rushed outward like a great wind-borne roar, and creation marked its passage. Then, like a great tidal wave falling back towards the sea, it drew back on itself, leaving the least of its substance at the farthest point of penetration. The waters of creation are deepest in the sphere of the Holy Spirit and shallower at the spiritual edge of the sphere of matter and mortality. Outward from there, they lessen to nothing. Now, said I, understanding is mine, but what of man? What of myself? How was man created? The voice of the good and great being, which I knew to be personalized manifestation of the Holy Spirit, answered me. All right, chapter 3, the making of man. The image and nature of the Supreme Spirit reside in the soul seed of man, just as the image and nature of an oak tree reside in an acorn. The pattern for the mortal body of man was formed in the sphere of the Holy Spirit and projected to the sphere of matter and mortality, where nature built upon it. When the time was ripe, the body prepared by nature was implanted with the soul seed of divinity, and the creature of earth became a man. From that day, man, unlike all other living things on earth, became a twofold being in his own right, mortal in body, but immortal in soul spirit. He is immortal only because he has been made the heir of divinity, and as such, all things are within his grasp. He is mortal because he lives within a mortal shell and is subject to a destiny in mortality. I said to the being who seemed so near, whatever man was when given divine life, it is said that he suffered a downfall or disinheritance. I heard the voice say in reply, man will not be disinherited, but he can make what he will of his birthright. The downfall of man was a fall from the sunlit heights of spirituality into the dark valley of agnosia. It was also a fall from a position of responsibility and trust, and man has yet to regain that position. Man fell because he declined to undergo the necessary preparation and discipline needed by one who aspires to climb the heights. Also, he possessed the powers of creation, and being free, could express them as he pleased. Man used them to satisfy his lower desires, and so brought about his own downfall. Since then, he has no longer enjoyed them to the full. Given free will and the ability, it was intended that man should direct his own evolution, but he proved unequal to the task. Man was intended to be the redeemer of reasonless matter and the controller of nature. For that reason, he was first called Lord of Creation. But it was nature herself who dominated the will of man and tempted him to betray his trust. She lured him into entanglement with the senses so that instead of being free, he became the slave of desire. The sweetness of the bait disguised the poison it contained, and the spirit of man was dragged into forgetfulness and mindlessness. Instead of being the master of a noble steed galloping along the road of immortality, man was now a blind creature bound upon a runaway horse. Notwithstanding this, he found the sensation enjoyable, believing that in being freed from the responsibility of control, he had found true freedom. Man had little effort to assume control, for this meant struggle, effort, and responsibility, and so he remained in the state of spiritual inertia called the mirror of matter. The soul spirit had entered the body only to be caught in the toils of the flesh. Man was heading in the wrong direction, and the way was all uphill. So now you see the voice continued that man was made a twofold being. Within, though this is a misleading description, is the soul spirit, but to all outward appearances, man is a mortal shell subject to decay. Though born to a heritage of divinity, man himself has freely chosen to suffer as the slave of his desires and the vassal of his weakness. He has bartered his spiritual birthright for a handful of fragile material baubles. Man, becoming enamored of the glitter from the first bauble offered, has lost his sense of values and has closed his eyes to things of real value. He has drunk the material waters of spiritual oblivion and now lies asleep beside the stagnant pool. He slumbers, awaiting the day of the awakener. There were things I understood and things I could not understand, and I said to the good and bad being, if the Supreme Spirit is indeed the essence of love and kindness, could he not have created man in conditions which gave him complete contentment and happiness, absolutely free from pain, sorrow, and restraint? Is all this suffering and distress really necessary? The reply came as though radiating from a being full of compassion and understanding. He could have created a perfect being and placed him in a condition of absolute contentment and happiness, but what purpose would this serve? Could such a being respond to love? Where could he learn its full meaning except in a state of lovelessness? Such things as love, pity, gratitude, mercy, unselfishness, and all the other virtues are uncreatable qualities which cannot qualities which can come into existence only through experience. Nothing can realize itself through a state of purity and perfection. Only by contrast can it become conscious of its existence. Pain checks man in the midst of senseless enjoyment and makes him ponder his fate. It causes him to turn his thoughts towards greater things and to reflect on the approach of death. Suffering, sorrow, and trouble are tests which, if passed successfully, qualify the soul's spirit for entry into the greater sphere of existence. They create in him the qualities which are needed there. To those who realize that these tests and trials have a purpose, they do not appear too harsh. But to those who cannot rise above them, or who blame the Supreme Spirit or their fellowmen for what befalls them, the tests and trials appear unnecessary, hardships barely endurable. Regarding restraint, ask yourself what it teaches and what qualities it creates, and then you will know whether it is necessary. Does not restraint also lead to greater enjoyment and appreciation? No man can say that the ordinances of the law really detract from the joys of life. Neither can it be said they are obstacles to the gratification of normal desires and the natural craving for pleasure. Read and examine them carefully. To what normal desire do they deny gratification? What natural impulse do they attempt to destroy? What reasonable pleasure do they prohibit? And what beneficial outlet do they seek to suppress? On the contrary, the ordinances of the law seek only to elevate and purify the lower impulses and bodily desires by controlling them with wise limitations, seeking only to subordinate them when it serves a greater good. Mortal cravings are made subject to higher aims, while lust and carnal passions are transmuted into useful material for constructing the glorious palace of love. The ordinances of the law are a means of guiding the evolving man towards beneficial and necessary ends. The unyieldingly oppose the bestial urges and the cravings for harmful pleasures. They oppose the tendency towards mortal inertia, which express itself in apathy and indifference in the search for comfort and ease. There are things which, though harmful, they do not absolutely forbid and seek instead to utilize towards a good end. I said, this I understand. If the world was created to serve man, then its fate depends upon his conduct. All right, chapter 4, Man, Bond and Free. These things were revealed to me in the days of my youth while I was still pure-minded and unsullied by the world. For I, like primal man, was tempted and fell, but through my descent took no more than a few days. The way back took twice as many years. Yet the things I learned when elevated in spirit to the sphere above have always remained clear in my mind. If then you ask, why did I, who had been granted this vision, fall from grace? Let me say that the pitfall was well and artfully covered. It was not baited by things that usually tempt, but by imitations and representations of things which usually inspire the best in men. Man is a crafty fish, not easily caught, and the hook must be carefully concealed and the bait well chosen. My friends, it would serve no purpose for me to tell the tale of my own fall, for never are two birds brought down by the same arrow. It serves better to tell what I learned in the sphere of the Holy Spirit, and this is what I discovered about man fallen into bondage or into slumber. The Supreme Spirit communicated with man through the Holy Spirit, and the message was that he should multiply and cover the earth. Man was told to never forget that he was the custodian of his race and the designer of his earthly dominion. He was also told that submission to carnal desires meant spiritual death, and that love is a lady worthy of the greatest respect and not a menial serving maid attending to the demands of a master. Those were the things man was told, but he gave heed only to the first. The man who has recognized his true nature has already stepped into the domain of spirituality. The man who has craved only for things pleasing to the mortal body and been led astray by carnal urges is lost and wanders aimlessly in the darkness of mortal wastes. His doom is to be devoured by damnation, the predator of these wastes. The stern manner of speech appalled me, and I asked, why must the ignorant suffer dire consequences, and why is man not more fully warned? The voice of the Holy Spirit answered me. The ignorant do not suffer because they are ignorant, for that is the state into which they were born. They suffer because they are content to remain in that state and have chosen to take the easy road of effortlessness. The consequences of ignorance alone are not so dire. It is wickedness, chosen either deliberately or unthinkingly, that damns a man. What he suffers is not a punishment, but the natural consequence of his actions. If a man places his hand upon a hot iron and is burnt, the pain is not a punishment, but the consequence of his actions. If a man cuts himself, he must expect to bleed, and if he walks through mud, he cannot expect to remain unsoiled. Those who seek refuge in the darkness do so not because they are condemned to suffer in this manner, but because it is the only place in which such as they can live. The worm does not seek the sunlight, or the leech find refuge in anything except slime. All things are drawn into conditions with which they have an affinity. That is a law of nature, as well as a greater law. Man is sufficiently warned, for the light has never been denied those who seek it earnestly, and everything about him proclaims the law of affinity. I understood the words of the Holy Spirit, and I was told other things which I may tell you, but you must not record them in writing. One instruction I was given, I now hand on to you. This is the choice. Too much regard for the mortal body and craven submission to it demands and desires, a craving for sensual pleasure and surrender to the lures of ease and luxury, enslave a man in the sphere of matter and mortality. He is held captive, exiled by his own choice from his true homeland. Such men are the slaves of mortality, or man can free his own true self waiting to greet him. The humiliating fetters of mortal bondage are then exchanged for the dignity of divine vestments. Man has the choice. He can be bond or free. Bondage means abject submission to something more powerful than yourself, while freedom entails the acceptance of responsibility and the expenditure of unenforced effort. The choice is before every man. Each has perfect freedom of choice and may accept the challenge of his nature or decline to do so. But upon his choice will follow happiness or misery, survival or destruction. As you have read, man is capable of righteousness and is called upon to be righteous. I thought of these things and saw the working of a natural law where each cause was followed by its own effect and consequence. I thought, too, of these things written in the good books and said, I have read, let the man who has a soul spirit awaken it. Have not all men soul and spirit? The voice of the Holy Spirit said, all men are souls within a spirit, for the spirit and soul are not one and the same. The souls who earnestly struggle towards spiritual unfolding, the Holy Spirit comes to reinforce the powers of the Spirit. The presence of the Holy Spirit supports them, and because of this is called the Comforter, though more often this is used to describe an earthly comforter. Even before the soul spirit departs from its earthly habitation, the Holy Spirit is there to comfort, for it is the guardian at the gates. But the Holy Spirit does not come near to the servants of evil and the wicked ones, for it has no affinity with them. Those who spent their earthly lives in bondage to the senses and bowed to mortal allurements, those who accepted their state with servility and paid homage to ease and luxury, have no affinity with the light in the sphere of the Holy Spirit. I spoke to the good and great being who personalized the Holy Spirit and said, tell me the manner in which I shall enter the spheres of the Holy Spirit. The answer came, not in a voice that beat against the ears, but as a melodious note struck on the chords of responsive understanding within. When the mortal material body is abandoned to disillusion, at death, the form you once had no longer exists. The vital breath goes out in one gasp and, devitalized, returns to mingle with the air. All mortal things return to their own sphere. What passes over and enters the sphere of the Holy Spirit is the soul spirit with all its energies and containing an intangible design of etheric framework upon which the new being will be molded. Just as the acorn contains the design of the oak and the seed of man the design for his body, so does the soul spirit contain within itself the design for its own unfolding. Entering the Holy entering the higher sphere, all mortal remnants will be discarded, and looking upward, the soul spirit freed into eternity will see the glory above. All the spiritual powers will be gathered about and may be possessed. The song of the newcomer will greet the newly arrived soul spirit. Welcome to our company, for we are your compatible companions and all one with you. I spoke again to the Holy Spirit and said, it seems there are many degrees in the higher sphere where beings are separated into groups. How then can loved ones be found? Are all groups cut off from each other? The Holy Spirit replied, the divisions may resemble groups, but they are not parted by tangible or impassable barriers, for the thing keeping them apart is the law of affinity. The same law operates on the lower sphere, where some forms of material expression are so unlike others that one may be completely unknown and unmanifested to another. The grouping is no more rigid on the higher sphere than on Earth. The law of affinity draws compatible soul spirits together, just as creatures on Earth seek compatible surrounding and the company of their own kind. In both spheres, there is affinity and antipathy. Understand the laws governing these, and you understand the nature of the divisions in the higher sphere. I thought for a while and said, I understand there are creatures of the light and creatures of the darkness on earth, and they are kept apart by their different affinities. A gentle lady is revolted by filth and sordidness because she has an antipathy towards them, while the besotted drunkard and unclean bawd is not repelled. The voice of the Holy Spirit was still with me, and I heard it say, this, then, is the end of the first stage, and here the tired wayfarer may rest and refresh himself. The first flight towards divinity has been accomplished. This is the end of the material mortality, and the mists of agnosia swirl far below. Now the conscious soul spirit can rejoice in the sunlight above. There, in the sphere of the Holy Spirit, surrounded by a form of glory which words cannot describe, and immersed in beauty as a swimmer is immersed in water, I was lost in rapture. I could think of no more to say, and having gazed on the face of reality, I would never more be a victim of doubt. The joyousness I knew can be known only through experience. To tell of it as futile as describing colors to a man born blind who cannot know one from the other by mentioning their names. Having glimpsed this glory and knowing what is planned for each and every soul spirit, I was filled with zeal and overcome with desire to awaken my brothers who lay wrapped in the sleep of indifference. I wished to stir them out of their lethargy and make them aware of the effort needed to attain glory. But in my enthusiasm, I rushed forward too hastily, and instead of achieving my objective, fell into the pit, which always awaits the hasty and unwary. Perhaps it is well, for in my callow youth I lacked the experience and knowledge of the ways of men to have been a proper teacher. Having told me these things and granted me the vision of glory, the Holy Spirit withdrew, and I sensed rather than saw the departure of the good and great being. Gradually I descended from the higher sphere and awoke on earth with an abounding feeling of well-being. The sleep of the body had freed the soul spirit, and the closing of earthly eyes had marked the opening of spiritual ones. From that day onward, I was a new being. All right, chapter 5. Wandering mission. I fell and struggled upward, my feet hardened on the stony road of experience. I drank heavily of the bitter waters of regret, and the purging fruit of remorse was gall in my mouth. Then when I had purged and purified myself and once more became a proper receptacle for the light, illumination was granted me. I was in communication with the Holy Spirit, and since that day grace has never gone from me. Having been filled with power and inspiration, I was sent out to teach the doctrine of the Supreme Vision. I proclaimed the Supreme Spirit to men and tried to direct their steps into the paths of beauty and truth. I was received with mockery and taunts, and many were the blows directed my way. I did not seek alms or beg, and whenever I went, earned my bread by working as a cobbler. My friends, this is how I spoke to anyone who would listen. Awaken, you sleepers who have abandoned life for slumber, who have scorned the effort of living. You have given yourselves over to the wine shop of morality and quaffed too deeply of the wines of sensuality and lust. Now you lie in a drunken sleep, ignorant of your spiritual existence and nature. You have sipped long from the cup of ignorance and drunk deeply from the flagons of thoughtlessness. Awake, open your eyes to a sober awareness of the beauty and love about you. Wake up and look into the light of soul spirit recognition. It hurts your eyes, but that is because they are accustomed to darkness. My friends, I led a life of frustration, for I was like a child who finds a loved parent too heavy to move. Lying drunk in a burning house, I tried to awaken people from their stupor and to draw them out of the darkness of ignorance, but they were bewitched by spells of vain ritual and held captive by irrational but beguiling teachings. When I said, the law is that man must struggle and strive or starve and perish, and this applies not only to the mortal body of man, but equally to his soul spirit, their answering voices came to me from the darkness of ignorance and from the depths of matter into which they has sunk. I heard them from the thick mists of agnosia, and they all said, we have our saviors and those who plead for us. We make acceptable offerings and pay due homage. Our priests stand between us and destruction, and we are content to leave our spiritual well-being in their hands. Leave us in peace, for your voice disturbs us, and with our hands full of moral affairs, we have no time to give for the contemplation of these things. My friends, my heart was sore within me, for I was a lone voice crying against the tempest. I said, open your hearts just a little and raise your spiritual gaze above the sordid drabness which surrounds your daily existence. Do not ignore the hopeful, helping hand I extend to you, for this ignorance which serves as the servant of evil floods the whole earth. Its currents sweep along all the aimless, drifting soul spirits shut up within unguided bodies, which are carried away to be sunk and lost in the depths. My voice appeared to call in vain, and my heart sank in despair, for with each failure and setback my confidence drained away. Still, I was not left abandoned, for the Comforter came to me in my darkest hours, and I was not left friendless. Refreshed by a surge of spiritual vitality, I continued my pleas. Men of Isolia, do not let yourselves be carried off by the strong currents of carnal desires. Do not ride the rafts of wickedness which must go with the wind and waves without direction. Row back against the tide of apathy and indifference. Bend your backs and pull with vigor. Seek the harbor where your soul's spirit can step ashore in its homeland. Why have you abandoned yourselves to drifting aimlessly on the sea of mortality, where, unless you awake from the stupor of apathy, you will be destroyed upon the dark lee shore? Awake, awake, pull for the harbor to windward. My body was seized and confined in a dungeon deep, and cruel keepers tormented me. I longed for the fresh air of the free highways, and when at last I was freed, I hastened to another place. Again, I raised my voice to any who would stand and listen and said, why do you share your homes with error and make ignorance your guest? Why do you welcome the misguiders and turn away those who bear the gifts of truth? Come out of your comfortable cottages where you sit quaffing the sleep-inducing draughts of agnosia. Get out into the fresh, bracing air of fully conscious life. Be a whole being, wholly awake instead of a half being, half asleep. Come, lay your hand to the plow and till the fields of immortality. Turn under the weeds of your past mistakes as green manure and trim your share to turn them deep. Come out from the stiffingly sleep-inducing air contaminated with fumes from the fire of complacency. Come out into the reviving cold and fill your lungs with the bracing air of reality. Arise from the comfortable drowsiness of apathy and step out into the stimulating winds of challenge and care. Again, few heeded my message, and most went away mocking, calling after me, "Where is your temple? Seek no offerings from us." Still, here and there, a few remained, and I gave them the knowledge of the true way, of how and by the what means they could tread the road to divinity. In them I could sow the seeds which, in order to grow, had to be harrowed in by worldly effort and watered by rain from the sphere above. For these few I was duly grateful, and in them comforted by the thought that I had not labored to dig a well in vain. My friends, I did not wait to see the harvest grow where I had planted, for fresh fields always lay ahead. I spoke as I walked, and I taught as I labored at my task. I protected the feet of men stoutly with good workmanship, and the spiritual wares I vended freely were no less serviceable. Ooh. All right. Chapter 6, The Forest Mission 1. The tests each man must endure have an affinity with him and with no other, so no two persons are tested alike. I, who have shod the feet of others, making walking more comfortable, was fated to suffer the trials of a cripple, and the day came when I no longer enjoyed freedom of movement. It was then I came to this place, and my stay here has been blessed in many ways. My friends, I will tell you now about the Supreme Spirit and his properties, and although this Supreme Spirit is neither male nor female, by convention men say him, and I will do likewise. Just as the eye cannot see the Supreme Spirit or the finite mind understand him, so can they neither see nor understand the perfect, the beautiful, and the good. These are the properties having their source in the Supreme Spirit, and they are things with which he is in love and therefore responds to. They are the things having an affinity with the soul. So if a man strives after perfection, beauty, and goodness, even though he lacks knowledge of the soul spirit, he will attain such knowledge. If he has no knowledge of the existence of the Supreme Spirit, this too will be given him. For if a man takes the road of York, even though he has never heard of York, he will certainly get there if he continues along the road. Therefore, my friends, if your desire is the attainment of the ultimate in perfection, beauty, and goodness, the knowledge of the ultimate in truth and reality, then it would be pointless to deny the Supreme Spirit. It would be no more than foolish for one determined to follow the road to York to its end to deny the existence of York. In any case, whether or not he believes it to be there does not influence its ultimate appearance. Because this is so, perhaps too much has been said about the destination and not enough about the road. The man who travels the road to York is better served by information about the road, its turnoffs and landmarks, than about his destination. Ford the rivers and cross the hills before you concern yourself with the hostelry fare. The best way to know and understand anything is to study its properties, and this applies no less to the Supreme Spirit. So, therefore, consider what is beauty, what is goodness, and what is perfection. Is it not true, and they can be known here only by their contrasts and reflection? If this is so, then where are they existing? Can a non-existent thing have a reflection, and what contrasts with nothing? The Supreme Spirit is the sun of the sphere of the Spirit, and the Holy Spirit is the light of that sphere. The worm, raising itself up at daybreak, sees the light, but departs before the sun rises, for it is too lowly to withstand the rays that have no affinity with slime. It has never seen the splendor which reigns above, though it knows of it through the light. The swallow soars and swoops in the sunlight and revels in its warmth, with which it has an affinity, but it cannot rise above its established limits. It can be the splendor it cannot attain as a bird. When the land is covered in mist, the worm remains above ground with safety, while the swallow defers its flight. So it is with the mists of agnosia. For when they cover the mortal sphere, the blind creeping things move more freely, while the winged creatures are restricted. Men who are dissatisfied with an unsubstantial reflection seek the reality which gives it existence, and these are they who gaze in the direction of the Supreme Spirit and divinity. One who, seeing the reflections, says to himself, behind this there must be something greater which I must seek, is a religious man. One who says the reflection is pleasant and satisfies me, for to seek for it cause is too tiresome, is a non religious man. Reflections are elusive, and those cast on the dark mist of agnosia the most deceptive. Many mistake the ugly for the beautiful, the imperfect for the perfect, and the evil for the good, and so are trapped by their desire of worthless and unprofitable things. To seek for perfection is to seek the Supreme Spirit. To seek for goodness is to seek divinity. To seek for beauty is to reach up for both. Seekers after enjoyment and pleasure gain little benefit, but to seek true happiness is a worthy aim, for it points in the right direction. Unhappiness, despair, and remorse are the products of ignorance, folly, and apathy. Evil effects flow from evil causes. Enjoyment and pleasure are unprofitable trees whose fruit may be tasteless or bitter. Ignorance is the darkness of the soul spirit, the smothering fog in which it becomes lost. It beguiles the spirit of man into a kind of drugged dullness. Man is no longer spiritually alert, keen, and energetic. He becomes inert, caught in the mire of matter. My friends, if any of you see imperfection in the Supreme Spirit, be sure that the apparent imperfection results only from your mortal limitations. It is like looking at the sun through coarse, soiled glass and thinking the spots and distortions you see belong to the sun itself. It is not the sun that is spotted or distorted. The defect is in the glass or even in the eye of the viewer. But the effect is as though the defect lies in the sun. However imperfect the reflected image may appear, the reality behind it, the Supreme Spirit, is perfect. The Supreme Spirit has always remained unmoved in the center of the wheel of eternity, which rolls its out rim through the universes of the lower sphere. He alone is the central, unchangeable reality, the hub around which all things revolve. Time begins in eternity and ends there, though it may itself appear eternal because expressed in revolving cycles, modified only by change. For me to speak of a beginning is a concession to mortal limitations, and in any case, it is pointless. The result, wayfarer does not look back along the road. Suffice to say that there was the one soul consciousness containing the essence of perfection in reality, which words cannot describe. When the potential power was stirred by thought, it flowed out in rhythm, and this was the beginning. Do not concern yourselves with these things or talk to others too much about the nature of the Supreme Spirit. To seek him without first becoming aware of the soul spirit is like looking for darkness while carrying a lighted lamp. The Supreme Spirit is the source of all spirit, and this is the power which flowed out and brought all else into being. The power flowed outward in the same order in which it returns. My friends, these are things difficult to understand, and it is pointless going into waters beyond your depth. Man has more pressing problems to solve within himself, so before delving into the nature of the Supreme Spirit, he should first seek to unravel the secrets of his own nature. Still more important, he should deal with the flaws and defects in his own makeup before seeking to probe further. When a man has to travel a long road, his first care should be the soles of his feet. All right. Chapter 7, The Forest, Mission 2. From the sphere above, a spirit force descended, penetrating into the sphere of matter and mortality, and this is called nature. Using the laws of cause and effect, necessity, and the conservation of life, nature cherished and nurtured the descending life force and, with earthly molds, modeled it to spiritual patterns. Life comes from the Supreme Spirit and reaches the sphere of matter and mortality through the sphere above, and nature works with clay. Man is the receptacle of life in both parts of his twofold being. though he should learn to concentrate it in his higher self. The life force becomes strong in the spiritual man, but is weak in the worldly man, just as it is strong in the eagle and weak in the grub. Hold on. There. There are forces in nature beyond the knowledge of man, but whatever they are, man must harmonize himself with them. It is unwise to contend with the unknown or challenge powers incapable of assessment. To live harmoniously, man must revere all forms of life and treat his fellow men with consideration and courtesy. All that is beautiful and beneficial is to be preserved, and man must never tire of adding to these. Nothing having life, beauty, and uniqueness must be wantonly destroyed unless it is known to be harmful. Thought is mind working through matter, and feeling is life manifesting in matter. Thought and feeling are not separable in man, for feeling unrecorded and unconditioned by thought would serve no higher purpose than a moral one, and man is more than that. Therefore, all feeling has to be conveyed to something that experiences and reacts to it. Thought and feeling are not absent from the sphere of the Holy Spirit and are even greatly intensified there. That is one reason why man has to learn to control them here, for the earth is a place where he is schooled to handle great forces and powers beyond his conception. My friends, the things I wish to teach form so high a doctrine that it is difficult to convey them to the clouded minds of men. Some will never grasp the meaning and message, others will laugh them to scorn. Those who try to help man along the steep upward road and who extend the hand of friendship are more often mocked than heeded. Man prefers to sleep on the soft bed of agnosia rather than be awakened to harsh reality. Those who disturb complacent slumbers are usually reviled. To think is to understand and believe, but to be unthinking and unbelieving is less disturbing and follows the wide way of ease and apathy. Almost men seek spirituality is to be left alone undisturbed. Most things unspoken here in the hermitage are not for the uninitiated and must not be recorded, for an infant cannot be entrusted with the firebrand. Initiation is the meaningful rite, the purpose of which is to awaken the sleeper and open his spiritual eyes. Little purpose is served by talking to a sleeping man, still less to a deaf man, and even less to one who has no desire to hear. So it is that men walk as though in a fog and see things hazily or with distortion. You, my friends, must go out among them and take their hands and be their guides. If they will not follow, they alone suffer, for if you do your best, you can do no more. Dealing with mind. This comes from the Supreme Spirit by way of the Holy Spirit and is to the Supreme Spirit like sunlight is to the sun. It is often likened to light, though previously explained to men in this manner, their sons in their delusion began to worship the sun, for man has always misunderstood the teachings and sought to bring them down from a high to a lower level. Those who seek the truth about their nature are men becoming more than men. They tread the road of godhood. Those who close their minds to truth are actually closing the doors of the cage in which they remain as little more than animals. The apathetic man becomes deluded under the influence of his own ideas and imagination. He readily accepts teachings requiring no thought or effort. If ever a teacher comes along who says, "Surrender your will and reason to me, and I will assure you of life everlasting," he will be unable to count his followers. Knowing the truth, you now realize the futility and foolishness of repeating thoughtlessly the feeble formula. I am helpless, miserable wrongdoer, bound by the misdeeds of my fathers. I am one naturally inclined towards evil and cannot save myself. Save me, have mercy, and forgive me, meek and miserable as I am. Those, my friends, are actual words spoken, and doubtless you will let them speak for themselves. Such an outlook is not only degrading, but it condemns man to disinheritance. It blinds him to his true nature, and binding him with knots of ignorance, hands him captive to enslavement and matter. Without doubt, it is difficult to understand the Supreme Spirit and his great plan, and all too easy to sneer and dismiss the disturbing thoughts and shun the effort. It is only after long and careful consideration has been given to the matter that a man comes to believe in spiritual things and his own immortality, and that is only the first step. Time has established that disbelief and lack of faith spring either from an inability to think deeply or from apathy. In either case, the mind falls prey to agnosia and, being weakened by ignorance and prejudice, slides wearily down the precipice into hasty and false conclusions. True spiritual enlightenment cannot be found through the written words of man alone or through reason and logic, but those are important signposts along the way. They point in the right direction, and the good books are reliable guides along the road, but there comes a point where to find a spiritual enlightenment, sorry, there's a fly, man has to commit, got his ass, good. But there has to come a point where to find spiritual enlightenment, man has to commit himself to a spiritual vehicle and be conveyed beyond the bounds of matter. The ability of any man to attain spirituality and know the truth is limited only by his steadfastness in the search and fortitude in the struggle. Can any man think long on the wonder of creation and the complexity of created things and declare truthfully that he believes they came into being of their own accord? Can he look at the awesome beauty of the spinning universe, now so old and yet so full of vitality, with never a sign of declining powers, and say there is no motivator behind it? Can he look at the life-giving light of day and the growth-controlling light of the night, at the teeming earth and burning stars, and honestly believe that all this is a matter of pure chance? Could all this vast and splendidly run universe have created itself? It could, if a tapestry can weave itself or a statue chisel itself out from the rock. Everything throughout the whole of creation conforms to certain basic laws, and where there are laws, there must be a lawmaker. There is only one set of unchangeable laws, and so there can be only one lawmaker. Were it otherwise, there would have been a clash of laws with resultant chaos and confusion instead of order and stability. Men have often asked me concerning evil and sought to lay traps with their questions. Evil is a kind of mildew, corrosion, or rust which forms on the pure creative impulses of good when they penetrate the lower sphere of matter and mortality. These impulses can be purified from the adulterating evil through change and regeneration. Everything descending from the higher sphere finds itself contrasted or reflected here, for this is the quality of matter. This contrast or reflection may be so different as to appear to manifest as evil. Everything on earth is evolving either upwards or downwards, becoming more like the pure pattern which left the divine designer, or more grossly material and earthly. Evil does not come from above and results only from the existence in an elementary sphere of change and decay. Here on earth, change is fundamental and, like everything else, can be made to serve a good or bad end. When a thing becomes too good, it is removed by change, and anything which becomes too bad is likewise removed. The unbounded wisdom of the Creator is beyond criticism, and only the ignorant and apathetic would criticize anyway. Unless there is a direction and control, everything tends naturally towards chaos and confusion. Undirected change can lead to nothing except disorder. Therefore, wherever there is orderly movement, there must be direction, and where there is direction, there must be a director. No sensible person who thinks deeply enough could possibly conclude that the great universe and the whole of creation are undirected. Who, then, could the creator and director be but the Supreme Spirit? All right, Chapter 8, The Forest Mission 3. Each soul seed is implanted into the whole being according to a preset destiny. From this grow the two branches of the whole being, the soul spirit and the mortal body. Though not of mortal elements, the soul spirit, by law of affinity, draws to itself particular elements when entering matter, and so all soul spirits manifest differently on the sphere of matter and mortality. Within the seed of man, there is the life potential, which has an affinity with the life breath impregnating the lower sphere. And this, when two complementary life impulses unite, causes generation of life. The new being grows within the womb by dividing within itself into particles too small for the eye to see. These arrange themselves as to form a copy of the model contained in the soul seed. Nature composes the body in the likeness contained in the soul seed according to the law of affinity, and each new being attracts or repels certain elements and conditions according to its destiny. Affinity and destiny act in such a way that no two persons are compounded and blended alike. Everyone is different down to the smallest particle of being. The soul seed is not drawn into the sphere of matter and mortality, but the desire for existence in matter, but simply by the law of affinity. Success or failure, fame or life as a non-entity do not depend on the present destiny, though this may make them easy or difficult to achieve. A man's destiny may cause him to be born rich or poor, frail or sturdy, civilized or savage, but it cannot make him accept or remain in this state. The power of procreation exists in both man and women, though the power manifests differently in each. It is one power with two aspects, the nature of which is not easily described. The ancients called it the twofold ray and referred to an active and passive side. One, they said, was lighter than the other. The reaction of the two aspects to each other expresses itself in the interplay of love. The compelling force is also twofold, expressing itself in a lower and higher form. My friends, I am often asked about death, which seems to frighten most people who consider it the greatest evil which can befall them. This is a wrong attitude caused by ignorance and spiritual apathy. Death comes when the body has served its earthly purpose, or should have done so, and is now worn out and ready to break up. The vital forces which have hitherto held it together withdraw and concentrate within the soul spirit. It is not the end, but only a separation, the severance into two parts, each returning to the place with which it has an affinity. It is not dissolution, but renewal. The immortal is absorbed back into its own element without dissolution, while the mortal part obeys its own law of decay and renewal. Death destroys nothing except the link between the soul spirit and the perishable body. There is something you should know and consider most earnestly, for it bears directly upon the afterlife condition. It concerns two kinds of wrongdoing, that done openly and perhaps I may say courageously, if such a word can be permitted to describe an evil deed, and that done secretly and slyly. Punishment for the former is often meted out by man, and this can, in many cases, cause spiritual readjustment. In the latter, however, the furtive deed is close hugged and so becomes accentuated within the sensitivity of the soul spirit. Because the evil deeds were hidden and not uncovered, the sly ones will suffer far more than those whose evil doing was exposed. Because of this, hypocrisy is to be condemned as a most detestable vice. Those who go through life practicing evil undetected, particularly if done under a cloud of virtue, will surely suffer much more grievously than the condemned murderer and thief. This is why the good books condemn hypocrisy and deceit more than murder and theft. For spirituality, the former are more potentially evil. It is a thing little understood. Just as little understood is the nature of sorrow and suffering. Of these there are two kinds, that which follows as the result of a foolish, wicked, or ignorant act, and that which destiny prescribed to test the soul spirit. Consider these things well, for it will lead to a better understanding of life. The soul spirit gives out a kind of glow called the spirit light, which can be seen by many of those who are spiritually awakened. It envelops the earthly body and forms something like a radiant ring above the head. In good men it appears bright and shining, but in the unrighteous it looks dull and drab. This is why it is said, the faces of those who have abstained from wrongdoing shall shine like the sun. It also indicates the different death conditions of people. However, it would be well for you to remember that abstaining from wrongdoing is not enough. You must act positively in the service of good. It is not pleasant, my friends, to dwell too long on the fate of the evil minded ones, whose after death condition is a nightmare of unending strife and unrelieved ugliness. These are the wretched undying dead who long for oblivion and the supremacy of death. This is not a pleasant teaching, but it is unwise to shun reality because it is painful to dwell upon. This is the escapism of weakness. Suffice to say that there is a place to which the evil minded ones are drawn by affinity, where remorse and regret are more pressingly painful than any cancerous growth. The suffering falls heavier for its postponement beyond death. The undeserved honors, the unwarranted good name, the unearned credits and benefits are not overlooked either. No man can escape the judgment of his regenerated conscience, which measures and judges according to what is revealed against a contrasting standard of absolute purity. Now, there is one thing often asked touching the teachings concerning the unclean place, the ultimate disposal of the spiritual garbage. My friends, the doctrine of eternal condemnation is false. This cannot be, for it asserts a downward finality, which not only is against the whole creative intent, but also questions the goodness of the Supreme Spirit. The misery suffered by the unclean beings in their self-selected filthy abode of shadowy horror is in fact a purging and purifying cure. Though it lasts many ages of time and the road upward through the destiny of matter is long and arduous, there is an end, be it in glory or oblivion. After so-called death, which word in former times meant no more than removal, each soul spirit goes to the habitat to which it is drawn by affinity. There, all the latent powers and qualities built up and hoarding during earthly life are released and revealed. These should suffice for complete spiritual happiness and freedom. And this is what the ancients meant when they said, his qualities will provide his food. Man, having learned to live harmoniously on earth, continues in a state of harmony above. The ancients also referred to this when they said, he who sows the seeds of discord reaps the wild wind harvest. My forest friends, the soul spirits of grown men and women are often enclosed within a hard-set cement of materialism. Compare this state with the innocence of a child whose soul spirit, unstained by evil, still retains affinity with the source of its being. But as the mortal body develops, so it closes in upon the being inside, encasing it in ever-thickening layers of grossness. Soon the light no longer penetrates, the recollection of the beauty beyond is stifled. The vision departs, and the soul spirit, shut off from contact with its homeland, sinks into forgetful slumber. The fleshy prison walls hold it fast, and communication with the freedom light outside becomes more and more difficult. The beauty fades away in the enveloping darkness. I, my friends, do not wish to dwell unnecessarily on the aspects of the higher teachings. They are ably enough presented in the good books of the ancients by and may be studied there. I would rather speak of the divine qualities. The greatest of these is love. For it is through love that man can best learn about immortality. True love brings all other virtues in its wake, and with them must come spiritual awakening. With spiritual awakening comes the influx of calming power, which makes men tranquil and quiet. It stills the rowdy haste, which saps vitality and calms the unproductive bustle. Dispute and argument upon spiritual matters becomes futile, for the awakened spirit is no longer dependent on unsubstantiated outward beliefs, but upon inward spiritual realities and assurances. Others have said that here, on the sphere of matter and mortality, man cannot have assurance, but from my own experience it would appear that assurance can be gained. There is a road to certainty, albeit a long and weary one. However, too much is said of spirituality in a world where it is an infrequent manifestation Only a few are in sight of the destination, while by far the most are still well back along the road. To these, the conditions to be met along the way are the location of refreshing wells and sources of sustenance are the most important things and the most serviceable information. So, unless you are one who has the end in sight, do not aim to immerse yourself too soon in the waters of spiritual rapture and devotion. There is a proper time and a place for everything. First, gain complete mastery over the body and control every urge and desire arising from it. This is the first step only, and the way and means are contained in the precepts of the moral law. Study these diligently, but remember that study and understanding without practice and performance is absolutely futile. First, learn to live as you should, and only then seek to advance further. Vice is the cancer, and depravity the plague of the soul spirit. Mean and petty acts of spitefulness and malice are the pockmarkers. Such things are like spiritual diseases which strike during spiritual weakness and debility. They flourish where there is avoidance of obligation and shunning of responsibility, where there is an inability to withstand pain with patience and fortitude, and with selfish seeking for diverting pleasure and unrewarding frivolity. These are the things condemned through the ages, and who, looking back, would dare say such condemnation was wrong? The greatest gift to spirituality, by which the soul spirit becomes conscious of its own existence, is not a state of easeful bliss. On the contrary, it is a driving force spurring the soul spirit ever onward along the road of godhood to the tackling of greater obstacles. The first struggle is towards self-conquest, mastery over the mortal. All right, chapter 9, the Forest Mission 4. Man is prone to error because of his mortality and because his earthly habitat is compounded of matter apt to lead him into evil ways. He is directed by destiny and subject to laws he cannot break, so the freedom he enjoys is largely a delusion. Escape lies in only one direction, which is upward, and this upward rising is called the road to spirituality or the true way. Mortal man is enslaved by the demands of necessity, but this is an essential quality of earthly life, which prepares for the enjoyment of the greater freedom beyond. Like a sleeping man in hostile terrain, the slumbering soul spirit is defenseless and exposed to attack. Good and evil spirits exert influence upon it, and unless stirred to wakefulness, it cannot discern one from the other. From the moment of its conception into mortality, the soul spirit is subject to influences operating under the law of affinity, which either attract or repel. These move to the irrational soul spirit center of sensitivity, where they set up throbbing impulses, which move like ripples circling outward, seeking compatible responses. These movements are under the administration of destiny. Just as the body has rational and irrational centers, so with the soul spirit. The rational part of the soul spirit cannot be dominated by spirits, either good or evil, without its own free choice. This is the part not naturally inclined to evil and more receptive to the ray-like impulses from the sphere of the Holy Spirit. The lives of all are ruled by a present destiny, but whatever this entails, each must rise above it, for destiny is the challenger, the handicapper, and the test selector. The soul spirit alone can be freed from the dominion of destiny. Mortal clay cannot. Therefore, the designs of destiny should be left to work themselves out solely in the mortal flesh. My friends, I'm asked, what is the soul seed and whence does it come? Above all is the Supreme Spirit, surrounded by the soul seed below, which is the spirit, and lower still matter. The soul seed is a drop from the soul seed is a drop from the soul sea, which has been separated out and becoming encased in a shell of spirit. It descends through spirit and returns there, and may do this many times. What flesh is to the soul spirit, so is spirit to the soul seed. The laws of the Supreme Spirit cannot be evaded, but man has within himself the ability to rise above them to greater freedom. He can, of course, choose the downward path and surrender instead of struggling, but as he descends, so does he become more subject to restriction, more like plaything of forces beyond his control. more like a wind-blown leaf. Freedom lies at the end of the upward road, not in the depths of matter. The true evils in the world are all man-made. Even disease and sickness originate in the evil tendencies of men. Evil can reach out even from the midden in the sphere of the Holy Spirit and strike at man. But did this not originate in their own wickedness? Here are generated unseen evil things which become parasites in the susceptible mortal flesh. They are indescribable in words, and there is no way of making them known to you. Yet they exist even as the soul spirit exists, unseen and mortally unknowable. My friends, the world need not be a place overrun with evil. If men could only cleanse the unclean garments of their minds, it could be a place of unceasing joy. Men bear the burden of their body with unintended sadness. They are like a man living in an empty tomb who shrinks from the bright sunlight outside. The longer he hesitates, the whiter and weaker his body becomes. Men still choose to ignore the message handed down through the ages. So, my friends, we make little progress. Man looks around him, hopefully, seeking inspiration from distant places, when all the time everything needed lies to his hand. The ancients spoke wisely when they said, "That which lies nearest is hardest to see." The ancient wisdom is as fresh today as it ever was. It is just as applicable now as it was then, and will never grow stale. Man places too much faith in things he can see and grasp, while unseen things give rise to disbelief and doubt. Yet his whole life is dominated by unseen things and forces beyond his knowledge. The only rock to which man can cling with faith and assurance is the unshakable ancient wisdom contained in the good books. The only thing man can strive for with certainty of benefit is goodness. Man can travel the road of perfection, but it is endless and discouraging. The road to truth is wearisome and full of pitfalls. If you asked for one rule to guide you safely, I would say ignore the authoritative voice of the body and listen to the quiet whispers of conscience. Now you ask whether the unclean soul spirit, degraded in darkness and humiliated by remaining in the substance with which it has an affinity, ever resumes life in worldly form. It may indeed extend out into the brutish body of a man, or into one more graceful, though heavily fettered by destiny. To say that any soul spirit is completely reborn in a new body is not strictly true, though it may manifest again on earth. Rebirth is accepted by those who worship the great goddess and by some others, but it is a much more complex matter than they believe. Their assertions are clouded by ignorance of the true nature of the higher sphere and the laws governing birth. There is, however, some truth in the doctrine, which is much deeper than they suspect. Nature models the earthly containers into which the soul spirit descends. She molds them according to the prescribed pattern and adheres to the spirit plan drawn by destiny. She likewise molds the bodies of animals and birds, though here the pattern is general and not differentiated by destiny as it is with man. Chapter 10. The Man God. The reaches of the sphere of the Holy Spirit and the sphere of matter and mortality are not without limitations, though within each there is everlasting change. The godlike divinities worshipped by man have their abode in the sphere above, and unless formed only in the imaginations of men, are no more than superior soul spirits. Least among these, though greatest among men, is the godlike man called Man God, the ideal towards which we all should strive. The Man God is a candidate for a godhood within the reach of every man, and has special godlike qualities of goodness and spiritual strength which set him apart from ordinary men. He is a strong runner in the race of life, and one who never withholds a helping hand from the laggard. Such men are rarities indeed, yet they are destined rulers of the world, the vanguard in the march towards godhood. Their day will come as surely as the sun rises above the treetops. The virtue of the Man God lies in his strong tendency towards goodness and his keen sense of judgment and justice. He knows when to stand firm and when to give way, and when to say, "This is enough." Notwithstanding this, he always inclines towards peace and reconciliation, even in the face of accusations of weakness. He knows it is the weak man who accuses another of weakness, and the man unsure of himself who has to be reassured by a spite of his own words. The man God treads with soft footfalls, but he steps from mountaintop to mountaintop. He prevails by reason and example, and not by force, for he is a natural leader of men. Though I abide by the teachings, I cannot see that it is wrong to honor the names of great men who inspire loyalty and obedience, who restore peace and justice. I would let the very names of the man gods ring out to fill the wicked with dread and the righteous with contentment. However, while the true man God is not recognized among the world leaders and not even sought for high positions, perhaps it is best. The day of the man God will come, and the nation which honors him will be raised above all others. But it is for the nation to bring forth the man God, and not for the man God to bring the nation. That's it. All right, chapter 11. The Vision of Evening. This land, which was once the school of spiritual enlightenment, is still the sanctuary of spiritual civilization, though we are cut off from our brothers over the water. Even now, terrible foreigners press about the pure land held in trust as divine estates and religious rites are neglected. But my friends, this is just a beginning, and the time is not far distant when there will be laws prohibiting us from the practice of worship, and heavy penalties will be laid upon the righteous. Yet I still lay the charge upon you, go forth and teach. The matron of the coming days will bear strange children, aliens blind to the light of beauty and nobility. The chants of weird forms of worship will be heard, and meaningless hymns will echo through the land. The devotional places will be wreathed with agnosia, and the purity of white enlightenment will be exchanged for the drab blackness of ignorance. Men will cease to seek their soul spirit sustenance in the light and will feed on agnosia. Unknowingly, darkness will be preferred to the light. The theme of life will be death, and death will even be idolized in the form of a man. The righteous man will be held up to scorn, and the irreligious will be deemed wise. Those with twisted minds will be held intelligent, and those who declare that good can only serve a worldly end will be considered righteous. All this will result from spiritual poverty and a lack of enlightenment, yet they will declare themselves rich and enlightened. The impoverished cannot surround themselves with grandeur, and this applies both to the flesh and to the spirit. Consideration for the soul spirit will be non-existent, and belief in its immortality will be treated as jest. The mind of a man will either be sent on worldly things or be clouded by a fog of spiritual darkness. There will be no respect for spirituality. There will be persecutions and wars, riots and looting. All manner of deceit and oppression will be practiced in the name of angry and revengeful gods. Worse still, all this will be practiced in the name of good, and men will blindly accept what they are told and execute orders running contrary to their natures. When spirituality has reached its lowest ebb and religion has decayed, the wheel will turn again. Man will either rise up with an influx of spiritual regeneration or go down and utterly perish in the dark depths of moral degeneracy. The world cannot be permitted to remain a spiritually festering sore, failing to serve any purpose. There are things buried in the future with which it is unprofitable to deal, so what is said must suffice. Better by far to deal with the problems of today, though even these are less important than learning the secrets of the true way. The awakened soul spirit of man becomes filled with a yearning not there before, an overwhelming desire for constant communication or unity with the sphere of the Holy Spirit. As this manifests more strongly and desires and inclinations tend to disappear, the soul spirit grows from strength to strength. Since the earth is the work of the Supreme Spirit, he who cherishes and improves it or adds to its beauty and goodness becomes an assistant to the Creator. This is a position all should aspire to, for the earth must not be uncouth or unadorned. Those who benefit most from life are those who serve it best. I have spoken of the man God, of the very few who are gifted with purity of mind and high intellect. These are the ones who should marshal the forces of mankind to serve the Creator, but all too often good men are not great men or great men good. As things are, the man who is both good and great is a rarity. To the spiritual means living life to the fullest in its wildest sense, making conscious contact not only with the sphere of matter and mortality, but also with the sphere of the Holy Spirit. As this means that the spiritual man differs from ordinary men, the crowd is not able to understand him, and often he is treated with scorn. This does not deter the spiritual man, who knows the mockery and scorn of the crowd are usually directed against someone superior to it. When I was held up to ridicule, scorned, and even believed mad, I felt flattered. Reality and truth are not to be found on earth, though man, being more than mortal, can conceive their existence, and some may even be granted a divine vision of them. How can such qualities exist in this sphere where good is adulterated with evil? Where there is no stability, where pain, sorrow, decay, and change press in on every side? How can any unstable, changeable thing be real? How can it be true to itself? Everything that is unstable changes and is therefore false to itself, and the false is unreal. The real is something unchanging. When a man can conceive what truth and reality actually are, he stands on the threshold of comprehending the Supreme Spirit. All right, chapter 12, the bodiless body. My friends, I see myself as one who has been granted a divine vision, a gift of insight beyond that of most men, these things coming to me through the grace of the Holy Spirit. This I know beyond any doubt. I have broken through the closed ring of mortality about me and taken possession of a deathless body. I am now an awakened soul clothed in spirit, and having drunk the waters of life in the sphere above, am more than mortal. With that, I could explain this better to your understanding, but the things which can be easily taught are of this world only, and higher things can be learned only by direct experience of the sphere of the Holy Spirit. The soul spirit is like a bodiless eye, seeing as men see visions or recall scenes from the past without the sight of the eyes. Yet this is no more than a poor representation of truth, for there are no means known to men whereby these things can be explained. To understand fully, each man must go out from the body to the sphere above, where only the soul spirit can go, and only then can the vision of beauty and reality be seen. It seems to me that this is not achieved even by the powers of the soul spirit, great as they are, but rather that in such cases man is uplifted by the very arms of the Supreme Spirit. There appears to be two subspheres co-joined, one the lower, where form and color still manifest, and above this another where these have their origin, and this is a place of quiet, restful serenity. It is a place of unchanging stability. You ask me about the higher vision. Again, it is difficult to express myself in words. It comes as a brilliant light, but not like the blazing glare of the sun, before which men are forced to close their eyes. It is a spiritual form of light, shining only to an extent within the ability of the one granted the vision to receive it. Those who, like my own master, can drink deeply at the well of visions are lulled into a sound spiritual sleep outside the mortal body, and can remain long in the place where visions reflect reality more clearly. Such men are true illuminated ones, and they are not many. By far the greater number are deceived by the upward reflections of illusion, but because these appear as glorious visions, they accept them as reflections of truth. This is always the great danger, but there are tests to guard against deception. Sometimes when an illuminated one speaks of the sphere of the Holy Spirit, its power will flow down into him to such an extent that his mortal senses will become blocked out. He will then appear to lose the trend of his own speech, and instead his mouth will become an outlet for the flooding channel of inspiration. Sometimes in such cases it is difficult for the listener to grasp what the illuminated one is saying, unless he too is in equal harmony with the sphere above. The words race ahead of his understanding. If sitting in darkness or gloom, it will be noticed that at such times a light or radiance surrounds the illuminated one, and it is this which establishes the reality of his spiritual elevation. Spiritual things are far more difficult to understand than earthly things, and their study requires much greater effort and discipline. That is why there are so few spiritual people. The lower mortal mind can gain only a faint insight into them through spoken words, and then only by a supreme effort of understanding. This proves too much for most people, and so spirituality goes into a decline. If the effort directed towards destructive or purposeless worldly things had been directed towards spiritual ends, the race of man would now be a race of man gods. There are some among you who do not understand the mystery of rebirth. It means rebirth into spiritual consciousness, and this is the central secret of all time, the knowledge of which will change men into man gods. The reborn man can bid his soul spirit go into any place he chooses, and it will be there quick as a thought. It will pass over the seas or penetrate through the denseness of the forest, not as a thing moving swiftly, but as a thing already there. The soul spirit, once freed, can rise above all denser material things, though it cannot penetrate into the upper subspheres of creation in the sphere of the Holy Spirit. Now, those of you who have experienced the power and speed of the soul spirit and examined by careful study the reality of the experience can surely understand the nature of the Supreme Spirit. If you can do these things, how much more capable will he be of doing them? Therefore, expand yourself to the utmost limit, break out of your confinement, slip away from the mortal body, and escape the shackles of space and time. Behind and beyond this, you will see the gateway at the path leading to the door of the Supreme Spirit. If, however, you prefer to imprison the soul spirit within the body and to treat it with contempt, saying, I know nothing and fear to reach out into the unknown. Wait. Ran that one off a cliff. If, however, you prefer to imprison the soul spirit within the body and to treat it with contempt, saying, I know nothing and fear to reach out into the unknown. I fear the limitless spaces, the unfathomable depths, and the boundless heights. I am afraid to seek too deeply in order to discover what I am or what I can do or what I will become. If you are numbered among those who tremble in fear, then you are not fully alive. You are already more than half dead. You can understand nothing of the truly beautiful. You cannot perceive glory, and if you love the mere mortal body so much, then you cannot really know good and are easily inclined towards the bad. Even the slumbering soul spirit can know through its dreams the joy originating from its affinity with the sphere above. It is experienced when the restlessness of the thinking mind is stilled and the joyous lilt of the heart filled with melody in the glory of a sunset. In the warm smile of love, in the confidence of a child, in the sweet scent of a garden, or in the cool caress of the wind. The cumbersome words of earth cannot describe its glory or reveal to mortal mind the majestic picture of truth. These words of mine do no more than reflect the pale shadow of the splendors of reality. Once again, I repeat, the true knowledge of the higher sphere can be gained only from personal experience through self-awakening. The soul spirit is potentially beyond spatial limitations and exists outside earthly time. It knows that everything is everlasting. Yesterday remains where it was. It is man who has moved on and left it behind, out of sight. Life is a steady advance. It flows on like the waters of this stream and cannot turn back on itself. The same stream passed this way 100 years ago. It remains the same, though moment by moment every drop passing by is new. So it is that we cannot return upstream, though the waters of life, to yesterday. However, when cast upon the bank by death, no longer swept onward by the flowing stream, yesterday becomes approachable. These are vital truths known to all illuminated ones. The childish mind of the worldly man sees things in unreality. The partially awakened, while in trance or ecstasy, see reality as though through a veil. They realize that The mortal eyes see only the unreal and deceptive, but they are between two spheres, see neither clearly, and so do not see reality either. The illuminated one alone sees clearly, and so knows for certainty that he is an immortal being. The discipline of the mortal teachings, when fully practiced and lived, is the first essential step towards illumination. It is only by completely eliminating his own self-centeredness that man can become aware of the communicating point within himself, whereby he can contact the reality above. Reality above. By this means alone, he escapes from a world of shadows and illusions. When the greater self awakens within, the peace and joy of spiritual consciousness fills life with splendor. But first, the childish struggle for worthless, unreliable things must cease. The spirit of man is like a caged beast, ever restless, ever seeking to escape to a greater sphere, but too often the restlessness is stilled by drugs of worldliness. The unenlightened man is unaware of anything beyond his limiting mortal wall or outside the scope of his own ideas and interpretations. Yet, his ideas are clouds of preconceived prejudices, and his interpretations deceptive illusions. And his interpretations, deceptive illusions. He is dead to reality, entombed within himself. The man who sees a tree stump in the night and mistakes it for a man is deluded, yet the tree stump is real enough. It is the misinterpretation by the man that makes it what it is not. Likewise, with the earth and material things, they too have a reality of their own, but man misinterprets, making them something they are not. His mortal body is also real, but this too has his misinterpreted to make it something different. The earth, material things, and his body are not what man mistakes them to be. He is deluded in the night mists of agnosia. The soul spirit is truly awakened when it has a personal experience proving the reality of the sphere of the Holy Spirit, and this is a far from easy accomplishment. There may be brief glimpses in a half-wakened state, but these are not enough, nor are they satisfactory. The higher sphere can be known and experienced. It is not something completely cut off from the knowledge of man. There, the answers is to be found. There, the secret of the opposites is revealed. There, truth shines with greater clarity. There you will discover that the soul spirit is a fragment of the Supreme Spirit containing the essence of his creative power. Thought, combined with the power of the Holy Spirit, can create whatever it desires. Whatever it wills to come into the being will do so. The originating creative thought has been modified on earth by the thought activities of many soul spirits, and so there is much that cannot be directly attributed to the Supreme Spirit. Meditate on this, for it explains much. Man remains generally completely unaware of his own powers, his limitations being in fact no more than the result of his own lack of knowledge and awareness, his lack of insight and preference for walking in the comforting calm of agnosia. The soul spirit can be whatever it wills itself to be. It is the fashioner of its own form and destiny. It can, if it wishes, see all things as they are in reality by sweeping aside the clouds of illusion and removing the veils of deception. Do not misunderstand me when I talk of the real and the unreal. Earthly experience, and material things are not unreal, for the unreal would have no existence. The things so often called unreal do exist and have a reality of their own. It is man's interpretation of that reality that is wrong. The things are not what man thinks them to be. They are false, deceptive, elusive. Even the words real and unreal are themselves deceptive and lead into error. This higher knowledge has been gained by those who have built upon their spiritual powers so that they could enter into direct communication with the sphere above. By their sacrifices and self-disciplines, they are so refined and strengthened their soul spirits that they could penetrate to the place where the light of truth shone clearly. That they were not misled is easily provable. The means of freeing the soul spirit are available to all men who first seek to discover their true nature. This is the beginning of the only direct road. The others lead to illusionary heavens. Each man is his own ruler and the director of his own destiny. Whatever advance he makes, even though it come through the teachings of others, will result from his own individual effort. The road to spirituality lies within himself, but too often it is blocked by barriers erected through his own ignorance and mortal weaknesses. The pain and suffering against which he so often protests are only attempts at goading him into clearing away the barriers. Study of the good books provide directions for traversing the road, but such study is worthless unless the teachings are put into practice. That is the secret, not knowledge, but practice. There are teachings which declare that man will become lost in a sea of oblivion, but this is incorrect. It comes from a misunderstanding of the all. Man will not become lost in the eternal all, but this will become a part of man, of each individual soul spirit. Were this not so, there would be no need for the continual conflict, the continual testing by affliction, and the continual presentation of new problems to overcome. However, it is useless speculating on the truth of other teachings until the truth of your own is established. One thing you now know for certain is that man is more than he thinks himself to be, far more than the mortal expanse of unawakened potential. This you know, for you have experienced the rapture of the illuminated. What you have done, others can do, for it is within the scope of anyone prepared to accept the necessary austerities and self-discipline. Not many will reach the goal of complete illumination, but all can obtain a momentary glimpse through the veil separating the sphere from the one above. All can awaken their soul spirit to consciousness, and only those who have done so can realize its glorious wonder. They become completely freed from every material limitation. They know themselves to be truly immortal, and to them birth and death are now no more than milestones along the road. They lose their significance in the great inpouring of consciousness, the invigorating surge of new life. All the awareness most persons encompass at any moment in time is just a minute part of the whole being. Some portions just on the fringe of the mortal are tapped from time to time, and these, such as a memory, play a large part in life. However, out in the vast expanse beyond, comprising the undeveloped part of man, lie the latent powers which he is incapable of utilizing. Within the reach of each man is an infinite spiritual treasure, if only he would expend the necessary effort to grasp it. All right, chapter 13, the life force. When the child grows up, becoming a youth or maiden, it enters into a struggle with existence with worldliness. It becomes like a swimmer setting out to cross a turbulent river. Individuals try to mold the world to their own way of thinking, but the world fights back, and in doing so shapes each one into an image differing from his own conception. To each person, Earth takes on a different aspect according to individual thoughts and inclinations. The life force centered in man is not something unique in nature, and the vast ocean of life seeks to draw it back into itself. Therefore, if the life force is to remain separate within the individual must be prepared to face conflict and opposition. The struggle to retain life cannot be renounced. No one can cut himself off from the difficulties of worldly existence or discard the burden of manhood or womanhood. While strength and vitality throb within the mortal container, worldly problems and difficulties must be steadfastly faced and overcome. But at the onset of middle age, each one should prepare for the downhill run, and by this time the soul spirit should be aroused to consciousness and be well and harmoniously formed. Each person should, by this time, be strong enough to face the inevitability of old age, decay, and death with equanimity. At this, the turning point of life, there should be an inward turning, a greater effort expended in seeking to understand the purpose and meaning of life. There should be a seeking after spirituality, after fulfillment. The sole purpose of earthly life is to realize and develop the latent powers in man. All the problems and struggles, all the spiritual difficulties and obscurities, all the paradoxes, the experiences of joy and sorrow, pleasure and pain simply serve to awaken the soul spirit. Life is all embracing. It includes both birth and death, growth and decline, the contrast, the opposites, the active and the passive, male and female. It is the knowledge of his individuality, his separateness, his consciousness of self that raises man above the level of the dumb creatures. But this position cannot be maintained without effort. It will always be easier to fall than to rise, to go back instead of forward. The child knows little of the burdens imposed by life, but as it grows older, its lightheartedness becomes overshadowed by the knowledge of duties and obligations, which must be assumed. The hearts of our weaker brethren are so often filled with a longing to return to the state of protected childhood that they are easily beguiled by parental faiths, which treat them as children. They find it easy to cast their spiritual burdens at the feet of comforting priests, but such action is not only childishly irresponsible, but it is also morally cowardly. The spiritually irresponsible who seek a comforting creed are generally apathetic or selfish persons, careless of their spiritual life and its needs. My friends, the final thing we must depend upon is the soul spirit. Only that accompanies the individual into the life eternal, but it is too late to come to this realization upon the deathbed. Those who have confidence in their future existence are the only truly contented ones on earth. Man should never forget that his most important aspect is the soul spirit, and he should not be neglectful of its needs and demands. He should not confuse it with the frail mortal body whose needs and demands, if given full rein, will override those of his greater self. Man must understand life. He must understand its forces which play about him. To understand it fully is to know one's own destiny, one's own heritage of struggle, and one's own trials. Man must resolve on the inner search and follow its trail diligently. When a man's life becomes a pattern of perfection reflecting the perfection above, he is a container for the life force and a channel for the downpouring power which serves to uplift the whole of mankind. Becoming this is in fact the only real service man can render the Supreme Spirit. Man's prime duty is to himself, and even when he serves others, he is serving his own ends. Therefore, he should not be hypocritical about his goodness. The good deeds of men are the soul spirit molders, as also are spirituality, freedom from agnosia, forbearance, love of truth and justice, tranquility of heart, simplicity, austerity, generosity, and integrity. Only in a well-balanced being can the life force manifest harmoniously. Therefore, all excesses of joy and sadness, pleasure and melancholy, despair and exhilaration are to be avoided. The rule must be oft repeated: moderation in all things and complete control over the self. My friends, I have revealed to you the nature of the inner being who controls all things from within. Now it is up to you to use this knowledge to good effect. I have shown you the cords by which the spheres are held together, and the same cords bind all things. You ask me, what is a good man? He is one in whom goodness triumphs over evil, whose qualities grow stronger daily, while his evil qualities weaken. In him, conceit, avariciousness, selfishness, anger, rashness, and agnosia are diminishing each day, and he governs his life in accordance with the good books. Self-mastery is freedom, not restraint, for it is bondage to the body, which makes life a misery to the man who aspires to goodness and the spiritually inclined. This bondage is caused by ignorance of the true nature of man and his destiny, and can best be overcome by a steady advance towards self-knowledge, spirituality, and soul-spirit awakening. The essential qualities for such advancement are tranquility of heart, which means serenity, self-mastery, fortitude, and resolution under the afflictions of life, kindness, and consideration for others, a life led in accordance with the good books. The man who is truly good understands the troubles of another and stands ever ready to help the weak and oppressed. He never boasts of his achievements and treats every woman with respect, the same respect he has for his mother. He does not sully his lips with falsehood and is free from the fetters of greed and envy. The life force diversifies into many expressions, the greatest of which is love. This is a prime quality essential to soul spirit awakening, but it may take on many forms. Reverence is a form of love, so is the appreciation of melody and beauty. Uprightness is love manifesting in self-control. Wisdom and desire for truth is another form of love. Duty and obligation call forth an expression of love in a different aspect, though no less strong and beneficial. My friends, there are those who teach that spirituality comes from turning away from the world, but this is a wrong teaching, for life is meant to be lived fully, and to live means to experience. A man who shuts himself away from the world can love no one except himself. To say he does it for love of the Supreme Spirit is empty talk. No step is lost on the path of experience, though sometimes what appears to be a gain will be a loss, but so may a loss be a gain. The wayfarer must keep one objective ever before his eyes, and that is the ultimate end. He must strive towards this with all his resolution and allow nothing to divert him. The alluring side roads are many branched and lead to dead ends, and along them worldliness beckons bewitchingly. Along the road there are strugglers and stragglers, seekers and non-starters. Therefore, if you would travel the road, firmly rid yourselves of the burden imposed by worldly and selfish desires. This does not mean that worldly things are to be completely shunned, for worldly success is not to be despised if sought with moderation and without prejudice to greater things. In all things there is a proper balance and state of harmony. However, whatever comes your way, do not become too elated with success or too downcast by failure. Both are tests and serve the same end. Labor is the cause of earthly gain, is of less value than labor which benefits mankind or glorifies earth. Therefore, if a creed brings men together only for worship, it serves little purpose. But if it is also a creed where men labor to learn, to beautify life, and to advance mankind, then it is of value beyond estimation. The life force must be conserved and guarded. It must not be dissipated in the uncontrolled tempests of passion and emotion. These carry away the life force as the winds carry away the autumn leaves. My friends, one of you says my words confuse him because they contain contradictions indicating two paths, and asks which is best for the attainment of the supreme goal. Let me say, and heed it well, that the most profound truths can be explained in the limited expressions of men only by seeming contradictions and paradoxes. Man may travel two paths to the perfection laying beyond earth. One is the path of wisdom lit by the lamp of vision, and the other the path of action lit by the lamp of determination. There are men of wisdom and counsel, and men of deeds and action are all equally necessary to maintain the balance and harmony of life, and an existence with one and not the other becomes chaotic. Two things man cannot do. He cannot refrain from learning, and he cannot refrain from action. He must not turn his back on life or renounce the worldly struggle. However, there is learning that is beneficial and learning which is not. There are actions which are good and others which are bad. It is the choice that counts. Man is like a cornered bear, and life is like the hunters who surround it, goading it into action, forcing it to strike. So are all men driven to action by the nature of things, and any who seeks to avoid it while permitting their thoughts to wander idly towards life's pleasures do inestimable damage to their soul spirit. The true man is one in whom wisdom and action are balanced, whose mind, controlling his inner forces with harmony, governs his resolute steps along the path of action, and the mortal body could not exist here were it not continually active. The life force in man turns the wheel of progress. Aim to be good and carry out your allotted tasks in life, and progress in the right direction will follow. Though it is folly to sit irresolutely at the crossroads, it is no wiser to press forward along the wrong road. Have faith in these teachings and follow the indicated path with cheerfulness, goodwill, and resolution, and your soul spirit will safely reach the high pass where it can look out over the good country spread before it. Ignore the inner urges which rise from the depths of mortal flesh and drive a man, often even unwillingly, to act wrongfully. Have faith in the reality of the soul spirit, for it is the only permanent thing in the ever changing waters of life. It may be hidden deep in agnosia, it may be clouded by mortal desires, as fire is clouded by smoke, by petty unfruitful pursuits, as a mirror is darkened by dust, or by the denseness of matter, as a kernel is hidden by its shell, but the reality lies underneath. The life force must never be consumed by flames of desires generating in the flesh. Unhealthy or abnormal desires, like wood ants, burrow into the minds of men and breed there, eating away their reasoning powers and wisdom. From such desires arise a noxious cloud of vapor which, having overcome reason and wisdom, smothers the soul spirit in darkness. Therefore, be masters and directors of your desires. Great are the powers of the senses and the worldly desires to which they pander to bind and blind. But the resources of the soul spirit are infinitely greater if you will only call them forth. So stretch out and grasp the sword beyond the limits of mortality and slay the enemies of the soul spirit. Even though you lack the resolution to fight for any cause, however great, fight for yourself, for your own preservation into eternity. Those who lack faith in the existence of truth, who cannot summon the strength to struggle, who have not the fortitude to stand the long, weary years of preparation, will never penetrate the veil to see the wonder and glory beyond. There is a glorious eternal beauty shining over the universal vastness, and in a rare moments of illumination, man may glimpse the everlasting in things which pass away. This is the message handed down through the ages. This is the message of all true spiritual teachers, all poets, musicians, and artists, all who beautify and glorify life, convey only the same message in infinite variety and expression. All right, chapter 14, the last for his teachings. My friends, the purpose and meaning of life are no longer hidden from you, and you know why men should follow the way of good rather than the way of evil. Every restraint and every restriction, every responsibility, every duty and obligation, however obscure the purpose, are imposed with only one end in view, your own ultimate benefit and good. Everything unnecessary or purposeless has been winnowed away, and only the sustaining grains remain. Nothing not worthwhile has been kept. Yet there is another reason for following this path, for by refining and strengthening the soul spirit and awakening all its latent powers, each man is potentially a man-god. He is no longer restricted to this sphere and can even contact greater beings beyond the mountain and from them learn the truth. Life itself is real, but as expressed in the sphere of matter and mortality, it is more than an illusion. The true being lives elsewhere, and where it lives, man awakes to eternity. The illusion vanishes, and he is confronted with the real. In this sphere, man dwells in bondage to a belief in the reality of the illusion. He is attached to passing shadows. He seeks to grasp something of substance in a place where nothing is true, substantial, and unchanging. Grind a stone to powder, and the powder to a powder of powder, and in the end you will have something tangible. Such is the basis of this unsubstantial place. My friends, you know too well how few soul spirits are awakened from their slumber on the soft couches of agnosia. Of those who do wake to consciousness are some who did so quickly and lovingly embrace the great light. They seek diligently and carefully for the tree of love and eagerly eat its nourishing fruit. Those are the noble spirits, the truly illuminated among men. A ray from the sphere of the Holy Spirit pours the vigor of renewed spiritual life into them, and they become more than men. You wonder why there are so few awakened, but is it not man himself, by his own folly and blindness, his own spiritual apathy, who has slammed shut the gate leading to the road of enlightenment? Perhaps the truth is that man declines the necessary spiritual effort. It is your task to sound the awakening call, to rouse man from his spiritual drowsiness and stir him into action. Do not concern yourselves overmuch regarding the nature of the Supreme Spirit. He is a being incomprehensible to those with only the limited faculties of the lower spheres. He exists within a divine principle upon which speculation is impossible, since it lies beyond the limits of mortal conception. Only the truly illuminated ones, the noble spirits, can approach the border of understanding, for they can see from afar. The treasures of his sanctuary are the ultimates of love, beauty, perfection, truth, justice, compassion, and goodness. I am asked how this faraway, formless one, awesome in changelessness, whose spirit fills the whole universe, can be worshipped. My friends, how can he be influenced from the lower depths of his creation? Can rain wet the sky or rivers fill the ocean? Concerning the form of worship, which is praise and prayer, do you think that doleful chants, mournful music, and mumbled prayer add to his glory or fill his heart with joy? These are gifts gathered from the woodland. Far more acceptable would be a freely dedicated heart purged of evil, the offering of a body wherein lust and unhealthy desires has been uprooted, the display of a mouth untainted by lewdness and falsehood, and the showing of integrity, honesty, and purity. True worship is the purification and elevation of the soul spirit, no more. All that purifies and elevates is worship. The purpose of worship is to arouse the soul spirit to wakefulness. It is the companionable unity of those serving a common cause. It is an act of mutual experience. It is not the servile humiliation of a slave before his master, but the linking of spirit with spirit. These are the only sacrifices to bring. Bodily lusts and passions, evil thoughts, lies, deceit, slander, and all forms of wickedness. To offer the blood of harmless creatures is easy and cowardly, and an insult to he who created them. These are the offerings to dedicate to his service: diligent study of the good book, wisdom, courage, moral purity, and steadfastness, together with all things serving the purpose of good. The only vestment needed for worship is a loyal, kind, and pure heart. To act as men do when worshiping is to belittle the Supreme Spirit. How can one so great be worshipped and served by fires and candles, by mumbled words falling thoughtlessly on unhearing ears, by sacrificial blood, and by ornament and incense? These things may serve a purpose in aiding man's awakening, but it is hypocritical to say they are necessary to the Supreme Spirit, and blasphemy to say he requires them from man. The Supreme Spirit rises above the thinking of men and says, if such things please man, then let the offerer become the recipient. The truly enlightened worship by a compliment in trying to match their purity and goodness with the reflection of these qualities coming down from on high. The ennobling of the lesser self, goodness in thought, word, and deed, the subjection of material urges, and constant disciplining of the body, and unwavering devotion to the cause of mankind, which is the cause of the Supreme Spirit. This is true worship, providing they are not clouded with hypocrisy. Worship serves the soul spirit and therefore is beneficial if sincere. Many have felt it first restless stirring in worship. My friends, how sad that the greatest treasure there is, the jewel beyond price, the soul spirit, still remains so often buried out of sight, unheeded, unsought, unwanted. Nothing is more impressionable than the soul spirit, and every act forms a guide to its future appearance. Thus, it is that every experience tends towards a repetition, and so a habit, good or bad, once formed, is hard to break. It is like water which cuts a channel, all other water follows. Man has a material sounding board called the brain, which means a drum skin, and this is very apt. However, if it is battered with impure desires or taken over by worldliness, it thickens and becomes a barrier against the spiritual forces. The brain, made dense with insensitivity and calloused by wickedness, forms a door which closes out all things of the spirit and becomes the servant of the senses. It no longer admits the light, and what light does penetrate becomes disguised and distorted into gloom. The door to the soul spirit becomes overgrown with weeds and brambles. The material and spiritual are separated by an immovable barrier, and the soul spirit slumbers while the body decays. Lacking the light, ensnared in sorrow and smothered in agnosia, degraded and sunk in the depths of matter, the soul spirit languishes and pines. Mercifully unconscious, it is pounded, twisted, and torn, uncared for and unheeded, its infant cries falling upon deaf and deadened ears. Slowly it is smothered under the great overburden of wickedness and worldliness. Little need you wonder why the dark spirits are so often called abortions. Man, having chosen to spurn spirituality and thus lost the union and consciousness which is his birthright, now seeks to console himself with worthless worldly baubles. With the arrogance of ignorance and blindness, he claims the reality of his environment, endeavors to possess something outside of himself, something to which he is half alien. The striving for worldly things still further buries the inner divinity, which becomes so encased in materialism that it can no longer be roused from its deadly slumber. While man turns his soul spirit outwards towards the elusive and deceptive world of matter and mortality, seeking fulfillment there, so long will he be unaware of his greater being. Here he will never find true contentment, and cut off from companionable communication with his true self, he will remain restless and dissatisfied. He will be always seeking for something, though he knows not what. The greatness of the soul spirit, with all its potential powers, a true spark from the fire of divinity, is now smothered under layers of worldliness formed by pandering to the body experiences of the senses. The true being becomes a prisoner within a material prison of man's own creation. Life is like a wide river containing the waters of manifestation, deeply clouded by the silt of illusion, wherein the soul spirits of men swim back and forth. The Supreme Spirit is reflected in the waters through his rays of Holy Spirit, just as a mirror reflects the face of the looker while itself remaining untouched. The image in the waters is the soul spirit. Those who say they can find the Supreme Spirit through means outside of themselves will seek in vain. What they will find will be worthless pebbles. The real jewel lies within. Only when the unreal is revealed for what it is and penetrated in consciousness can the real come into sight. This can be proved beyond any dispute by personal experience, but few care to pay the price of such knowledge. The waters of illumination cannot be gathered on the heights of arrogant self-assurance or on the hilltop of prejudice. Neither can they be drawn from the valley of apathy or the dale of agnosia. I am asked concerning the people about us. They are not altogether ignorant in their teachings, and it is not amiss to understand what they declare about the nature of man. They say he is a divine thought caught up in heaviness and wrapped about in clay, with clay. The thought imprisoned in darkness, desired to see the light, and the effort generated by the desire caused two holes to appear in the clay, and these became eyes. One of them looked to the right of things, and the other to the left, and so directed straightly. No eyes appeared behind, as the divine thought never intended man to retreat, only to go forward. The eyes, being fixed on the path ahead, wished to know what was going on beside them, and so the effort generated by this desire brought forth two holes, which became ears. Because the clay desired to remain moist, a mouth was formed to provide water, and the arms were formed to push aside whatever got in the way. So that it might know more of what is happening about, the clay became sensitive and felt. So they say man is a divine thought trapped in a body and seeking to escape. They say the body is no more than clay reddened by sunlight, and can anyone say this is not a good description?